The great hall of the twins echoed with the heavy silence of tense diplomacy. Robb Stark, king in the north, sat straight-backed on a wooden throne beside Lord Walder Frey's high seat. His jaw was clenched, but his eyes betrayed nothing. Beside him sat Roslin Frey, his new bride, a girl with soft features and trembling hands, not of his choosing but now of his fate. The hall smelled of roasted meat and stale wine, but also of something less tangible, fragile peace. The union had been sealed 2 nights ago with whispers and vows. No love passed between the two, but in war, affection was a luxury Robb could no longer afford. He had broken his oath once to Talisa, a healer from Volantis, but in this tale, he never married her. He had sent her away, heart-aching, duty-victorious, and for that choice House Stark had not been betrayed. Not yet. Lord Walder Frey sat across from him, beady eyes watching every move like a carrion bird, uncertain if the prey was truly dead. "You've made the right choice, Your Grace," he said, voice wet and smug. "A wife for a crossing. Loyalty." "For victory," Robb nodded. "And I expect your banners the next time I ride." "Oh, they'll ride," Frey chuckled. "They always do. When the cause suits me." The Northern Lords weren't thrilled. Lord Karstark muttered often about to kneeling before worms, and Great Yonumber nearly walked out during the wedding feast. But Robb reminded them all, a king who wins is a king remembered. A king who dies for love is just another song. Soon after the wedding, the Freys marched, 10,000 fresh men, well-fed and eager to fight. They joined Robb's depleted forces, just in time for the Riverlands counter-offensive. The Lannisters had grown cocky, thinking the young wolf cornered, but they had underestimated the value of broken promises mended. Robb's tactics remained fierce and unrelenting. He attacked Jaime's leftover forces near Harrenhal, cutting off their retreat and burning their camps. Lord Bolton, ever watchful, had grown silent, his messages fewer, as if waiting for Robb to fall. But fall he didn't. He rose, one skirmish at a time. And then came the letter from Catelyn, news that Sansa had been forced to marry Tyrion Lannister. Robb's knuckles turned white as he read the Raven's message. His sister, a political pawn. He wanted to march to King's Landing, to rip Tyrion apart with his own hands. But he knew he had to be smarter than his enemies. Roslin Frey watched him that night in silence. She did not speak unless spoken to, but when she finally did, her voice was barely more than a whisper. "You will win. I've seen it. The gods do not reward those who keep their hearts. They reward those who keep their vows." Strange comfort, coming from a girl born in a den of vipers. And so Robb planned. With the Freys bound to him and the Boltons leashed for now, his focus turned to Tywin Lannister. Winterfell had fallen. Bran and Rickon were presumed dead, but war demanded the heart be put away, locked like a direwolf in a cage. Robb marched south, leaving the Riverlands in the hands of Edmure and Brynden Tully. He kept his banners close and his enemies closer. Every tent held whispers, every campfire crackled with doubt. But something had shifted. He was no longer the boy king trying to avenge his father. He was a wolf cloaked in steel, surrounded by men who had seen him rise from ashes. And far away, in King's Landing, Tywin Lannister read the latest Raven and frowned. The boy should have been dead by now, but the boy had married a Frey, and that had changed everything. The march through the Crownlands was long and bloody. Robb Stark rode at the head of his army, the direwolf banners flapping in the cold wind, beside the twin towers of House Frey. With each passing village, more men rallied to him. Disillusioned river lords, abandoned reachmen, and hedge knights tired of Lannister gold and their broken promises. They called him the wolf who kept his word, and in a realm built on betrayal, that title held more weight than 1,000 swords. Roslin rode behind him, her face hidden behind a hood, always silent, always watching. She was no queen in the eyes of the Northmen, but she had done what no one expected. She gave Robb the power Walder Frey had hoarded for decades, and for that, she was safer among wolves than with her own blood. At Harrenhal, Robb set up his war council. Bolton arrived late, as expected, his face a mask of politeness and concealed contempt. "My apologies, Your Grace," Rose said, dismounting slowly. The Dreadfort's roads are unkind. Robb stared him down. I'm sure the roads feared. To slow the Leech Lord too much. Bolton smiled thinly. I serve, as always. But Robb no longer trusted that phrase. Since marrying Roslin, Robb had learned to read lies the way his father once did, through silence, not noise. Bolton's lack of outrage over Theon Greyjoy's betrayal, his casual tone when discussing the fate of Winterfell, his vague reports from the field. It was all too convenient, but Robb would not move against him yet. He needed Bolton to believe he still held favor. Let him show his hand. Let the snakes think the wolf sleeps. The war moved quickly now. At the Battle of Sohorn, Robb ambushed Sir Adam Marbrand's forces, using the Frey cavalry to strike from the eastern hills. Lord Karstark, still fuming over the death of his sons at Jaime's hand, fought like a man possessed, personally cleaving through 5 Lannister knights, before taking a lance to the thigh. Even wounded, he refused to leave the field until the last lion had fled. Robb's banner stood tall over the bloodied plain by sunset, but the victory came with whispers. That night, as the tents settled and the wounded groaned under moonlight, Great John Umber approached Robb with a furrowed brow and wine on his breath. Bolton's men were slow to flank, he grumbled. Too slow. Either they were drunk, or they were waiting to see who'd win before they picked sides. Robb nodded. He had noticed it too, but he said nothing. Not yet. Instead, he summoned Lord Bolton to his tent under the guise of discussing the next day's march. Rose entered quietly, hands clasped behind his back like a maester, not a lord. "Do you question my loyalty, Your Grace?" he asked after. Robb spoke of the rumors. Robb leaned back, gaze cold. "No, Lord Bolton, but the men do, and their trust is harder to regain than a crown." A pause, tense. Then Roose bowed his head. "I will make amends on the battlefield. I always do." Robb let him leave, but not without planting a seed of fear in the Leech Lord's mind. The next week brought the news Robb had hoped for and feared. Stannis Baratheon had fallen at the Wall. The wildlings scattered, Mance Rayder captured. The north was still broken, but the Boltons had no more reason to delay their betrayal. With no rival claim to Winterfell standing, Rose would make his move soon. But Robb beat him to it. At Duskendale, Robb turned the Frey riders loose on a Lannister outpost, and when Bolton's men failed to arrive on time again, he had Lord Tytos Blackwood accidentally flank them instead. A few loyal northern captains from House Mormont ensured the arrows flew clean and fast. By dawn, Rose Bolton's second son lay dead, and the message was clear. You are being watched. Choose your loyalty wisely. Back in King's Landing, Queen, Regent Cersei screamed into the night when she learned Robb had breached the southern roads. She demanded her father march back from Casterly Rock immediately, but Tywin had already left, with an army meant to crush the River Lords in the rear. Instead, he now had to face the wolf that had outlived every prediction of his death. And Robb? He did not march to siege King's Landing yet. He aimed for Harrenhal again, this time not as a staging ground but as a seat of northern justice. A message was sent to Lady Catelyn. Bring Sansa to Harrenhal. The king calls his sister home. The game had changed. Robb Stark had not only won battles, he had started winning the game. The sky over Harrenhal was thick with smoke and crows. They circled like omens above the towering ruins, as if they knew history was being rewritten beneath them. Harrenhal, once cursed and crumbling, now flew the direwolf of House Stark and the twin towers of House Frey, and below those banners, the greatest lords of the North and Riverlands stood assembled around their king. Robb Stark, no longer the boy who rode south with honor and fury, now wore a face carved from winter itself. He stood before a war table stained with ink, blood, and broken promises, and addressed the men who had bled for his cause. "Sansa will arrive by week's end," he said, eyes fixed on the map. "With her a claim, and with her claim a future the Lannisters cannot unmake." Great John Umber slammed his fist on the table. "Good. Let the girl wear a crown of fire if it means we burn the lions out of their holes." Lord Tully was more cautious. "Your Grace, bringing her here. Tywin Lannister won't stand idle. She's still his daughter-in-law." "She's my sister," Robb said sharply, "and if they want her back, they can come take her from the ashes." The room fell into a silence only broken by the soft caw of the crows above. The tension was thick. Victory always invites fear. When you rise too far, the fall becomes the only thing people talk about. Roslin stood in the shadows, always watching, always listening. No one asked her opinion, but she wrote letters quietly. Ravens flew from Harrenhal every morning, never bearing her seal. And one night Robb found one of her missives by mistake, half-burnt, unopened, addressed to Lady Jenna Lannister. He did not confront her, not yet. Instead, he ordered the northern host to prepare for the inevitable, the final march to King's Landing. In the Red Keep, Tywin Lannister did not rage like his daughter, nor weep like his grandchildren. He read the reports with cold precision, each letter another nail in a coffin he refused to accept. 10,000 Freys have not broken, he muttered to Keevan. Stannis is dead, the Boltons no longer respond, the wolf grows bold. Keevan sipped his wine. Robb has made no move on the capital yet. He's holding Harrenhal, waiting. Tywin nodded. He waits because he knows if he strikes first, he overreaches. Then his eyes narrowed. But if we provoke him, perhaps the boy king still bleeds like one. He summoned a raven that very night, to Casterly Rock, to Old Town, to the Eyrie. And one quiet raven to a place no Lannister had ever sent word before, the Iron Islands. By the time Sansa arrived at Harrenhal, the castle was alive with whispers. She had changed. No longer the delicate rose of court, her gaze was colder now, her words deliberate. When she dismounted, she did not weep at the sight of her brother. She curtsied, like a queen. "You summoned me, your grace," she said. Robb stared, half in awe, half in mourning. "You're home, Sansa. You're safe." "No one is safe," she replied, glancing at the burned walls of Harrenhal. "Not here, not anywhere." That night they spoke in private. She told him of Tyrion, of court, of Joffrey's games and Cersei's knives. She told him how she survived not by fighting, but by pretending to break. Robb listened in silence. Then, finally, "I need you, Sansa, not just as my sister, as a Stark." She nodded. "Then let me play the part they taught me." And so she did. Word of Queen Sansa spread like wildfire. In taverns and villages, the tale of the Stark girl surviving the Lannister cage gave hope to those too long under Lion's claw. She had suffered and risen, a maiden no more. She was ice and iron, and the rumors spread faster than even Robb expected. That's when the first ambush came. Outside Fairmarket, a group of sellswords bearing no banners struck a northern supply caravan. They left no survivors, but the armor they wore bore traces, subtle Lannister sigils etched on the inside, half filed away. A message: the lions are not done roaring. Robb responded with fire. He sent Greatjon and the Blackwoods south to harass the King's Road. He ordered Glover's men to cross the Trident and burn the Lannister fields, and he called upon the Vale once more. Lord Royce of Runestone responded first. "Robb Stark is the only man who has held his word in this war," his raven said. "If the boy wants justice, the Eyrie will not hide behind its mountains much longer." And so the army grew again, now 60,000 strong, with the North, Riverlands, Frey and Vale banners fluttering together. Robb stood on Harrenhal's broken ramparts, Sansa beside him. "When we march," he said, "it won't be for revenge." Sansa turned to him, brow raised. "Then what will it be for?" He looked south toward the capital, toward the throne built on 1,000 swords and rivers of blood. "For something better," he said, "for something they never thought a Stark could claim. The southern winds carried more than heat. They carried death. It came in the form of a raven from the twins." Robb's hand trembled slightly as he read the letter by torchlight in Harrenhal's solar. The wax was Frey blue, the words written in a hasty scrawl. Lord Walder Frey, ancient and bitter, had been attacked in his own halls. 2 of his sons lay dead, one of his wives raped and hung from a tower. The attackers had worn iron-born leathers, reeking of salt and fire. "The Greyjoys?" Robb muttered, voice low and sharp. "How the hell did they reach the twins?" No answer came, but the rage in his voice was enough to stir even grey wind from the shadows. The direwolf snarled at the window, hackles raised as if the winds themselves whispered betrayal. A second raven arrived within the hour. This one bore the kraken, Balon Greyjoy claimed credit for the attack. The note was short, mocking. "The boy forgot the sea and now it rises to drown his war." Robb's blood ran cold. The Ironborn had returned, not just to harass the north, but to sever the Frey alliance at its root. Lord Frey had survived, but barely. And his message was even colder than Balon's. "You promised protection. We bled for you and you left our bridges undefended. This was your oath, boy. And your betrayal." Robb slammed his fist against the stone table so hard that the goblet near him toppled and spilled wine like blood across the map. The room fell silent, but for the crackling torches. "Damn the Krakens," Greatjon growled. "Let me ride back and burn their ships from under them." But Robb was quiet now, eyes hard. "No," he said. "We ride forward," Lord Tully frowned. "You would let Frey blood spill and not answer?" "They've already made their choice," Robb said, voice heavy. "They're not asking for justice, they're warning me. The Freys, they're gone. Walder's turned, or will." "And the Ironborn?" someone asked. Robb turned to his bannermen. "The North will have to fend for itself. We finish this. War now, or we lose everything. King's Landing is vulnerable. The Vale stands with us. We move now." The march to the capital was slow and tense. Every rider could be a spy, every raven a lie. Roslin said little, but her eyes betrayed a nervousness that hadn't existed before. She asked too many questions, about their route, about their scouts, about how well Harrenhal was guarded now that they'd left it behind. Robb pretended not to notice, but that night in his private tent, he summoned Lord Manderley and whispered a single order. "Watch her. Quietly. No moves until I say." Sansa knew something was wrong too. She watched Roslin with the same cautious curiosity she once reserved for Cersei. And she noticed things, like how Roslin's hand never trembled anymore, how she suddenly knew the names of Robb's guards, and how her maid was caught once writing a second letter, one she claimed was a poem. Sansa didn't believe in poems anymore. Tywin Lannister had waited long enough. He met Robb's army just north of the Blackwater, not at the gates of a King's Landing but on open ground, where lions felt strongest and traps worked best. With the sun behind them and golden armor gleaming, the Lannister host stretched for miles. Sir Keevan at the right, Sir Adam on the left, and in the center, the old lion himself, eyes hollow with calculation. They'd brought wildfire barrels. They'd hidden archers in the surrounding woods, and somewhere within their lines, House Frey had returned to the lion's side. The betrayal came at dusk. A horn blew from Robb's left flank, the Frey horn. What was supposed to signal the charge instead became chaos. Their cavalry turned mid-gallop and slammed into Stark outriders. Screams echoed across the battlefield as Frey blades found northern flesh. It was the Red Wedding all over again, but this time under an open sky. And still. Robb Stark did not falter. He led the countercharge himself, grey wind by his side, his sword red before the first stars appeared in the sky. The Vale Lords didn't break. The River Lords held. And Sansa didn't hide. She stood in the rear camp with a dagger at her hip, helping the wounded, screaming commands to the maesters and guards. This wasn't the girl who had once begged for Joffrey's favor. This was a Stark of Winterfell. The battle raged until moonrise. By the end of it, the Lannisters held the field, but Robb Stark still lived, and so did his sister, and so did their vengeance. But they had lost too much. That night, Robb sat alone in a torn tent. His crown lay on the dirt beside him, dented and blood-smeared. Grey wind lay wounded, panting. His sword was still in his hand. Roslin was gone. She had disappeared during the battle, taking 2 horses and one of Robb's guards with her. And Robb said nothing. Only when Sansa entered did he speak, voice low and hollow. "I chose honor. Once, and it got father killed. I chose duty, and it got me betrayed. What do I choose now?" Sansa didn't answer. She just sat beside him, the silence between them heavier than steel. Outside, the crows feasted. But somewhere in the burning distance, the bells of King's Landing began to ring. The Starks were coming. Dawn broke over a ruined field soaked in, blood and broken armor. The Stark host, though wounded and scattered, had survived. Against Frey treachery and Lannister wildfire, Against betrayal within and steel without, they had not broken. And neither had their king. Robb Stark stood atop a ridge overlooking the river. His armor was cracked, his shoulder bound in torn cloth. Grey wind limped at his side, growling at every shadow. Around them, wounded men were being carried, banners, restitched, blades resharpened. The air reeked of fire, ash, and mourning, but the wolves were still standing. Sansa joined him quietly, her hair braided in the old northern way now, her green eyes harder than emeralds. She held no crown, but no one questioned her presence beside Robb anymore. She had stopped being a girl long ago. "The Lannisters think they've won," she said, watching smoke rise from the woods. "Tywin will write poems about his final victory." Robb didn't smile. "Then we write something else in his blood." They had lost nearly 8,000 men, but the Vale had not retreated. House Royce still stood tall. And the River Lords, those who survived the Red Wedding that never was, had found vengeance sweet enough to blind them to pain. The Freys were gone, again, this time for good. But the worst wound came not from sword or fire, it came from a raven. Roslin, Frey has taken shelter in Casterly Rock. She had ridden south with Lannister gold and northern secrets, and worse still, she had left behind a final letter in Robb's camp. It simply read, "You should have loved her, not used her." And though Robb never spoke of Talisa in this version of his life, everyone knew who the letter meant. At the Red Keep, chaos bloomed like a garden in drought. Cersei screamed at every council meeting, demanding more men, more fire, more gold. Joffrey was dead, poisoned by some whispered hand at his wedding. Tyrion stood accused, and Tommen, poor quiet Tommen, sat on the throne while lions bled for a cause no one understood anymore. Tywin, despite all his experience and power, knew it in his bones. He was losing. The Freys had failed. The Ironborn had taken only chaos, not control. Stannis was dead, but the North still burned with vengeance. And Robb Stark, despite every move to bury him, still walked toward the Iron Throne. So Tywin played his last card. He sent a raven to Dorne and another to Braavos. But one more, he wrote with his own hand, to Daenerys Targaryen, "Queen of Ashes, let us speak." Meanwhile, the Stark army marched again, this time not to conquer, but to break the wheel itself. Sansa suggested the route, not along the King's Road, but through the Blackwater's lesser trails, paths used by smugglers and rebel spies. She had learned them from whispers in court, from the books she read under candlelight, while Joffrey laughed with his crossbow. She had listened when no one thought she was listening, and now those secrets would serve her house. It was Sansa who told Robb about the hidden passageways into the Red Keep. It was Sansa who told him the names of the traitor guards still loyal to Varys, and it was Sansa who said, finally, "You want to win? Let me inside." Robb had refused at first, called it madness. But Sansa had looked him in the eyes and said, "They trained me to smile while I was bleeding. They made me wear gowns while I plotted escape. I know their faces, their lies, their games. Let me play it one last time." She entered King's Landing in a cart of grain, disguised as a peasant girl, escorted by Northmen posing as traders. It took 2 days to reach the gates, one more to slip into the kitchens. No one recognized her. She found the old tunnels Varys once whispered about. She made contact with Tyrion, chained and broken in the dungeons, and she found Tommen, the last Lannister king, locked away by his own grandfather's protection. But she didn't come to kill him. She came to take him. 3 nights later, while Tywin met with emissaries from Dorne in the Tower of the Hand, the Red Keep caught fire, not from dragons, not from wildfire, but from the people inside it, freed. Slaves, abused servants, and women who remembered Ned Stark's head on a spike. Sansa had whispered to them, fed them hope, promised them something more than golden lions and cold crowns. And while the fire spread and chaos reigned, Robb Stark rode in through the southern gate, with 10,000 screaming Northmen behind him. No siege, no battering rams, just war and fury and truth at last. Tywin fled to the throne room. There, sword in hand, he waited beside the Iron Throne, calm as ever. And when the doors burst open, it wasn't Robb he saw first. It was Sansa, alive, standing before the throne. and holding Tommen by the hand. "This war is over," she said, voice like ice. Tywin laughed. "You're just a girl." And then Robb entered, blood-streaked and burning with vengeance. "No," he said. "She's a Stark." And Tywin Lannister finally understood what real fear felt like. The throne room was no longer a hall of kings. It was a battlefield painted in shadow and silence. The great iron seat, forged from the swords of 1,000 fallen warriors, loomed in the dim light like a beast waiting to devour its next master. Blood glistened on its steps, smoke drifted in through shattered windows, and at its base stood Tywin Lannister, blade in hand, pride carved deep into his face, though the world he'd built crumbled around him. Robb Stark faced him across the room, sword drawn, his armor battered, cloak torn. Grey wind flanked him, one eye sealed shut from battle, the other glowing with rage. Sansa stood to the side, Tommen behind her, her dress torn but her spine straighter than any queen. "You would take this seat?" Tywin sneered. "You? A wolf, pup dressed in banners and vengeance." "I don't want the throne," Robb said flatly. "Then why come?" Tywin stepped down one stair, slow and cold. "Why burn the city?" "I didn't," Robb said. "The people did." Tywin's lips curled. "And you think that makes you a savior?" "No," came a voice from the shadows. Tyrion Lannister stepped into the light, his face gaunt, eyes full of storms. The chains were gone. So was his name. "I think it makes him the last man standing." Tywin's eyes narrowed, rage blooming like poison in his chest. You helped them." Tyrion gave a bitter laugh. "Helped them? I survived you." "That's enough." Tywin didn't reply. He lunged, but Robb was faster. Steel met steel, sparks lit the air. The clash echoed through the broken hall like the tolling of a bell. Tywin fought with precision, with experience. But Robb fought with something older, wrath and justice honed by loss and betrayal. They danced around the Iron Throne, two ghosts of a kingdom that should never have been born. One blow. Two. Robb bled from the arm. Tywin took a deep cut to the leg, and then Tywin made one mistake. He glanced toward Tommen. Just a flicker, just long enough, and Robb drove his sword clean through the lion's chest. Tywin gasped, sharp, guttural, final. He sank to his knees, gold armor clanging against the blood-slicked stone. His eyes didn't close. He fell staring, at the throne, at the dream he'd built with fire and death, and then he was gone. No cheers, no songs, just the creak of leather and the soft weeping of a child who'd lost the only protector he barely knew. It took 3 days to secure the city. Robbie ordered food to the streets. The Red Keep was emptied of Lannister loyalists. Sansa took control of the small council. Varys reappeared like a shadow, rejoining its master, whispering in her ear, helping her rebuild not from loyalty, but from respect. Tyrion vanished. Some said he fled across the sea. Others whispered he stayed in the crypts, mourning a family that never saw him as one of their own. Tommen was spared. Crown removed. He would be raised in the north under Sansa's watch, not as a king, but as a boy, free to be human. The Iron Throne stood untouched. Robb never sat on it. Instead, he melted it. The dragonfire barrels stored under the city, remnants of Mad King Aerys' madness, were used at last, not to destroy but to erase. Sansa watched as the Iron Throne buckled and twisted in flame, until nothing remained but molten steel and ash. "We do not need a throne made of swords," she said to the crowd. "We need something better." In the weeks that followed, Robbie named no successor. He returned to the north, scarred and quieter than before. He ruled from Winterfell, not as a king, but as a Stark, a warden, not a warlord. Sansa remained in the south, the Wolf of King's Landing, they called her. She led the council of lords and ladies, reshaping the realm into something not perfect but possible. She wrote letters to every corner of Westeros. She forged peace with Dawn, trade with the Reach, and respect from the Vale. She married no one, and no one dared ask her to. Bran returned with stories too strange to understand. Arya never came back. Rickon's grave remained untouched beneath the old god's trees, but the pack endured. Years later, a girl asked her grandmother if it was true that a wolf once ruled over all of Westeros. The old woman smiled and said, "No, child, he didn't rule it. He saved it.